Welcome here to the Ignite Institute. My name is Matt Turner, the superintendent. Welcome to our second design team meeting. So thank you for being here for that. Really excited to have this time with you. Let me talk a little bit about the room and some of the rules to follow within the room. So we're here together as a large group. Thank you for that. We'll go by the rule of 2 feet. You have 2 feet. Use them when you need them. We have restrooms out the main door here, off to the left and off to the right, both men's and women's, each direction. We have some bottled water and some other things that are on your desk, your tables there, for you. So, but if you need to get up and stretch your legs, you need to do something like that, please, you do that on your own time. So I want to say this is a very unique time and a unique moment where we are right now. You know, we all hope that we're in the end stages of this pandemic with COVID and moving forward. And this is a time, though, as a school district, as a community, we need to move together. We need to come together as a school district and as a community. And we want to make sure that we provide and we hope and we provide positivity for our employees, for our students, for our families, as we look forward to a great future in talking about the hopes and the aspirations that we have for our children. So just to recap very briefly for you, I know most of you were here for meeting number 1, but in meeting number 1, we discussed how the world has changed. We looked at global factors, we looked at human intervention, we looked at the pace of change, we looked at the workforce. Now tonight, we're going to take some time to review some of the data that you provided at our last meeting. And we want to be sure that we consider and we honor that input that each of you gave. And we want to make sure that you are ready and prepared to do that tonight to give some input as well. So during meeting number 2 tonight, what we'll do is we're going to examine essential skills and we're going to examine mindsets. And we're going to discuss some of the competencies that we feel students need to thrive today and thrive tomorrow as well. So I want to take just a moment to talk what that means as an organization for us as a school. We're not simply going to select a group of competencies and just sit and just let them sit there. We're going to do some work with those. What we're going to be doing, let's say that we chose collaboration and we felt that was a very important thing for our students. If we chose that, what we're going to do is go to our kindergarten teachers across the whole district. What's collaboration look like in kindergarten? What do we expect for them to be able to do together? And how are we going to be teaching that? And then we do the same thing with our first grade teachers across the whole district and all the way up through the grades. So we can start thinking about what's that competency look like at each level so that we as a system can help teach that, help measure that, but also so kids can see that and they know what the goals are, what the targets are within collaboration, so they can aspire to try to achieve that and know, here's my target, here's what I'm working for. So there's lots of work that we can do with that that's going to be very powerful for our students, very powerful for us as educators in our buildings. And so I'm really excited to get into this work and get moving with it. So I really appreciate each of you being here for that tonight. So lastly, during tonight's meeting, just a couple notes for you. Bring your best thinking. Focus on the future, not on the past. Think very deeply about language, because that does make a big difference. Speak from your heart. Realize that the potential of every single child starts in this room, in this space, with the work that we're doing, planning for the future. Give your honest and productive feedback in the online system that we have, and I believe you have the little scan QR code, thank you, sir, that you can scan in to get into that system. We really want to gather your data tonight as we move through this. And lastly, I want you to think as an individual and as a team member, because this is going to have to be work that we do together. And there's going to be some things we're going to agree upon and some things we may not, and we're going to have to work through that. And on that note, so in closing, I want to share a little quote with you. This is from Booker T. Washington, American author and educator. Very appropriate for the work we're going to do tonight and our future work. He said this: I've learned that the best way to lift one's self up is to help someone else. So let's keep that in mind. Thank you very much. I'm going to turn the program over here to our facilitator from Battelle for Kids, Steve Fucci.
Round of applause for Mr. Turner, please. You got me? I was told to make sure I checked that, Mr. Superintendent. Certainly appreciate your guidance and your words as we come into this, because I think, to reiterate what you said, nobody's in here by accident. Everybody is in here very intentionally for the skills that you bring into this space and the work that you do. In addition to a round of applause for our superintendent, I'd also like to see if we can give the folks in the back of the room here a round of applause for providing the refreshments, having the tables set, all of the evening's kind of preparation that they've done to make sure you've gotten into this space as well. Can we give a round of applause for the ladies in the back? They don't even know that we're clapping for them, and yet we're showing them that gratitude anyway. Thank you for allowing me to be here again for meeting number 2. It certainly is exciting, and one of the things that I find to be most exciting is the fact that this room's every bit as full, and maybe even to some degree more full than it was the first time around. I've heard of spouses who have joined their wives to come. I've heard of additional team members who have also asked to be in the space. Nobody is here by accident. So bringing that authentic self into this space and thinking about every student for Boone County Schools moving forward is very important. Thank you for allowing me to be with you as well. To that end, my name is Steve. If we didn't have the chance to meet the first time around, I want to make sure I have the chance to say that to you now, and that I work for an organization called Battelle for Kids, dedicated to the power and promise of 21st century learning for every student. We talked a little bit about what that could look like last time. Some materials for you. At every desk, there should be at least 6 agendas. How about this, a round of applause for your table mates, because you got to pick where you sat tonight versus having an assigned seat. This young lady up here is giving a round of applause. Thank you very much for that. Oh, look at that. And Keith now doesn't want to sit by himself over here, so he's joining folks too. I appreciate that, Keith. A quick note about that. So on your table, you have a QR code. Superintendent Turner asked me to make sure I kind of walk through that briefly, because our data collection really will be through this platform to the best of my ability. The reason I bring that up for you in this space is because you have several opportunities tonight to address things like your hopes, dreams, and aspirations for every child. By scrolling along the bottom of the site, you can also look at images that might compel you to think about Boone County Schools. You can ask very specific questions to be addressed in between this meeting and the next. And then there's a couple of polls that we'll get to in there as well. So as the night goes on, I invite you that if you have any questions about how to access any of that information, please, please, please hunt me down, because I'll come and help. It's so important to us to be able to collect data from you and not my interpretation of the data from you. We have 170 folks in this room. I don't want to get my interpretation wrong. The easiest way for me to be clear about that information is for you to tell it to me directly. So I really do invite that. Finally, before I'm done talking, you also have access to the different materials that are there and that were there in the first meeting as well, in case a question comes up for you tonight. But I've done too much talking already. There's a notepad and pen at your table. Let me say this. Nobody forced anyone to sit in any particular place in this room. So before we start tonight, maybe an opportunity to get to know one another. I'll tell you, that was some of the strongest feedback from our last meeting, was the chance to talk and meet somebody else in the room. I'd love to invite us to be able to do that. Here's the 3 prompts I'm going to ask for. The first one is, and I have a couple of students in the room too. There is no grade on this. This is not an art class. So draw whatever you're willing to draw that represents to you a creepy crawly. Some sort of insect, a bug, something you like, dislike. I'll be honest, as many times as I've done this, it doesn't even have to be a creepy crawly. It could be something that kind of, you don't like. The second thing that I would ask you to draw is an image of a chore. We all have chores that we have to do. Mine would be putting away the dishes every night. It drives me up a wall. Got to put away the dishes. That would be the one thing that if I could get rid of out of my life, I would love. What are you willing to draw and share with somebody else? What's a household chore that you have to do daily, week? My son would talk about maybe having to do the pooper scooper out in the backyard for our animals. Maybe that's the chore that he dislikes. Do me a favor and draw an image of a chore you dislike. There's Post-it notes or little pads of paper that are Boone County related. Let's use some of those materials tonight. We'll take a few moments. Just sit there. No grade for this. No reason to not do it. Just draw a creepy crawly and a chore. Something that represents a chore that you don't like doing. Simple instructions. It's okay to smile. Thank you very much, ma'am, in the back for smiling. It's okay, because the next set of instructions, we're going to get up here in a moment, we're going to meet somebody new, we're going to explain our drawing, and we're going to do something. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I have one final request. My final request, as you're finishing up your sketches, I have one final request. My final request is to write the name or the what you might call somebody that is a maternal influence in your life. Who's somebody that is a Grammy, grandma, a mother, a mommy, a mom, Sheila, Joanne, whatever it is, write the name or what you call a maternal influence in your life. So you should have 3 scraps of paper or 3 Post-it notes or 3 little images on your... Oh, now people are willing to do it. All right, I get it. That's funny. You should have 3 sketches. The first one is a creepy crawly. The second one is a chore, something you have to do on some sort of routine basis. And the third one is the name of a maternal influence in your life. And if it's not the name of that person, then maybe it's what you call them, like again, grandma. Now, here's what we're going to do. A moment ago, our superintendent talked to us about all of the different people in the room. We know that we have students here. We know that we have administrators here. We know we have educators here. We know that we have business members here. We know we have community members here and parents here. Everybody is giving of one of their 2 finite resources in this world, of money and time. You're giving your time tonight. Thank you for that. What I'd invite you to do is in a moment we're going to get up and we're going to share our picture of a creepy crawly. We're actually going to go across the room. We're going to introduce ourselves to somebody we don't know. We're going to call this Make a Friend. Students, don't be intimidated. It's web to web. Shake a hand. Make eye contact. Introduce yourself. It might be an elbow bump. Let's be respectful of people in masks and how we feel about that. People have different comfort levels with it. But meet somebody new and share your creepy crawly. After we do that, I'll know, and I'm going to give one more set of instructions. Any questions on the ask? One of the top-rated pieces of feedback you guys gave me last time is I really enjoyed getting to meet somebody new in the community, so I want to make sure I can build on that. Any questions about what the prompt or the request is right now? Okay, everybody, if you would, please, let's go ahead and become mobile. Meet somebody from across the room and share your image. If I can get our attention, please, for one moment. Everybody had a chance to meet somebody new. Is somebody willing to introduce us to a new friend and tell us what they drew? Nice and loud. Thank you very much. Nice and loud. Hi, Leslie. A silverfish. What is a silverfish? Okay, we have a silverfish.
Silverfish, yes.
And it is?
It is what?
It's like a centipede.
It is? Oh, yes. It's like a centipede.
Thank you
It's
very
got
much.
lots of hairy legs.
Nice to meet you, Leslie. Can we have one more volunteer? We got a microphone right here. Here we go, right here. Thank you very much.
I met Gina, who has children at North Point and Connor Middle School, and she drew
Hi, Gina.
she drew a rat.
A rat. All right. Well, here's the power we're taking tonight. I want you to go ahead and crumple up that image. I'll stay around and clean this up. It's okay. You can put it on the table. You can stomp on it. You can crumple it up and put it in your pocket. Anything is fine. Get rid of that image. It no longer gives you the creeps. Now, our second set of instructions is find a new friend and share with them your image of a chore. Find a new friend, share the image of a chore. Go. Here's what I'm going to ask us to do. In the manner that we did, we talked about our chores in the same manner that we talked about creepy crawlies. Is anybody willing to introduce us to their new friend and tell us about that person's maternal influence? Can we have somebody who's willing to introduce us to a new friend and tell us about that person's maternal influence? Yes, here we go. Thank you very much. I'll bring the microphone back to you. Excuse me, I'm going to sneak by. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Denise Van Leuven, and I met Don Black. He's the,
Hi, Don.
You're the VP, instructional coach. There we go. Here at Ignite, and his maternal influence was his first principal named Joanne when he first entered education not many years ago, just a few years ago. So he still is friends with her, and he appreciates the guidance that he got from her.
Wow, that's a powerful story. Thank you very much, Dawn. Thank you also, Denise, for sharing. Can we have one more person share, introduce us to their new friend and that person's maternal influence? Thank you very kindly. I'm going to come back here. We have a triad. We have a group of 3 willing to share with us. There we go.
Hi. Well, her name is Adriana. I am speaking for her tonight. So we met Jenny, and Jenny's greatest inspiration was her grandma, Vera. And she was like the most wonderful giver that she ever met, and she inspired her whole life and her career in education. So it's a very big person for her.
Outstanding.
And this is Adriana, and Adriana has her biggest influence is her grandmother. And her grandmother was a teacher, or her grandfather was a teacher, her grandma was a nurse. So I said that means that Adriana truly has a heart of gold as a servant leader to others. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have a third. Do we want to share to the third person? Thank you so much. I'm sorry. Well, thank you. A round of applause for everybody who introduced themselves. Yep. And before we go back, here's the opportunity. The opportunity is go ahead and rip that name up, crumple it up, and stomp on it. I'm just kidding. You don't have to do that. Go ahead, go back to your seats, please. Thank your new friend. So, the question inevitably that happens after this conversation is, okay, Steve, why did we just do that? And it's a fair question. It really is. From a facilitator standpoint, let me tell you about something I noticed while we do it. Number one, when I first give you make the request of you to draw something on paper, some people just look at me like, whatever, I'm not going to do it. And that's fine. And then all of a sudden, when you realize that I've got to be accountable to somebody else, some people all of a sudden pull out that piece of paper and start scratching things down. It's inevitable. It happens everywhere I've been and every time I've done this. Second thing that I'll share is the amount of laughter that sometimes happens when we talk about the chore and the creepy crawly. But then when we talk about the mother or the maternal instinct, we hear things like inspiration. We hear things like heart of gold. We hear things like that weren't necessarily specific to the instructions, but we even sometimes, I've done it, and people have like kind of cried in talking about who that influence is and why that influence matters. And this activity comes from a pastor in North Carolina. I've read this book every year since 2014. It's called My One Word. And the idea behind the My One Word book is that instead of setting New Year's resolutions, sometimes you select a word and you reflect on that word for an entire year. The intent being that words really resonate longer than other ideas sometimes do. That intentionally focusing on specific words kind of empower us to do things like to be inspired, to have feelings kind of come up in us. And no matter how many times, like I said, I've done this, nobody is willing to rip that name up, even though it's just a name or it's in reference to somebody on a piece of paper, because of how that feels. Inevitably, that is a challenging thing to do. I have every year striven to, and I think I maybe share this, I don't know, but I try to read 100 books a year. And in doing so, I always start my year with that particular book because it allows kind of the power of language to wash over us. And tonight, that is also the intent of what we intend to do. I just used intent kind of twice in that sentence. That's also a little bit of the purpose about why we're here. We want to select words that will resonate in this community beyond just this moment in time. Our superintendent talked about kind of into the future ideas. And those ideas, as we've discussed, we are always going to be talking about the bedrock of deep academic content. That is a must, that is a non-negotiable. But that deep academic content doesn't always lead us into this realm of deeper learning. What are the ideas that help to elicit 21st century skills for all of our students that will prepare them for the world beyond just school? We spent some time talking about how the world has changed and examining those implications and talking about whether or not we think those things are true for Boone County. Tonight we want to talk about the essential skills and mindsets that are necessary for students to thrive today and tomorrow. So we've already had our first conversation. We're going to pivot here in a moment to what those results look like, because tonight's going to be a little bit different. It will be far, and many of you will be thankful for this, it will be far less of me talking and much more of you being able to talk together so that we can understand what those essential skills and habits are for us to move into the future. Things that you said went well last time. Your survey feedback, just like tonight, will help to influence what we do next time. Your survey feedback last time will help influence what we do tonight. Number one, somebody wrote that they enjoyed thinking about the information presented in the conversation of landscape shifts, and that the discussions with tables and with members that aren't in the same group were powerful. I liked making a new connection. I heard perspectives that were both enlightening and challenging. In a like manner, it's just as important for me as a facilitator to say what I can improve or what can be improved. We need to find balance. We need to be able to get up, move, and discuss ideas with other individuals. So it was important to me tonight to start off by doing that, and we'll make sure that we do it again within our time. The time was too quick. The time was too quick at the same time. How do we think about staying on task? So that I'll take that challenge to heart, and I'll work to make sure that we stay crisp with our times. And then, how about this? It's hard to hear in a room full of people wearing masks. Guess what? We're in a room full of people, and we don't necessarily have that same requirement anymore. So hopefully we're going to be able to hear one another a little bit easier, but we still have well over 150 folks in the room. So the idea that when we go into table conversations, it still might be challenging, but at least we won't have the filter of the mask in place. I wonder, what questions did you have? I wonder what work needs to be done to bring our visions to fruition. That's not my language. Somebody wrote that, and I appreciate that. Our superintendent actually talked a little bit about this at the very beginning when he talked about his big vision for where we're going. While I certainly agree with that, and I would never dispute our superintendent, I just want to underscore it and say, I also think it's important for us to give ourselves grace in order to set that vision first. I think as my work will continue with Boone County, we'll build a strategic plan and we'll talk about scaffolding and how to get from point A to point B. That absolutely will come. But let's give ourselves the permission first to set the right target. Let's make sure that we're oriented on something that as community stakeholders and a diverse group of people from Boone County coming into this space, let's really spend time talking about what that needs to look like first. Additionally, I like this one too. How do we change what's been happening for decades? I think that's really valuable. And I suppose that the one thing I would highlight in this conversation is the way we began to have that change is by having conversations like this. If this were simply a school initiative, we have very intelligent school administrators and school educators that would set forth doing this and they would give it their best effort every day. But this is an opportunity where the superintendent and his leadership team have really asked for, in a vulnerable and transparent manner, what does our entire community say we need to be thinking about in this space? So if we really want to change or think that something needs to be changed based on what's been happening for decades, it kind of really does start at least with the vulnerability of asking the question. So to that end, if maybe I'm thinking too pie in the sky, I have been accused of that before, but to that end, I also think that that's part of where the courage for the district lies. Finally, a wonder or what can be improved is how will we get there? Again, I'll come back to that grace and patience conversation. Let's give ourselves that grace to figure out where there is first. What is there? Let's start defining that. So, we started out by level setting with everybody in the room. We talked about these landscape shifts. Superintendent Turner talked very diligently about the 4 ways we bucketed this, from a workforce, pace of change, kind of world interactions, and human interactions. You're going to see on page 3 of your agenda the results for what Boone County said specifically. We asked you to consider these ideas on kind of a 3-point Likert scale. We said, if an idea is so important that it is critical for us to consider, we're going to say that that's critical. To me, I'm going to define that as a 3. Or we said, maybe this is something that's important, I'm not really sure, but it sounds like this is an important idea for us to consider. I mark that as a 2. And then our final choice, and this was the one where I said, maybe you're just being nice to me. Maybe you don't care about this idea at all, and this idea is just interesting, but it doesn't compel me to any kind of action. I don't know that I see it here in Boone County. So we asked you to really think about those landscape shifts in these 3 ways. Listed here is a representation of what's on your sheet. What I tried to do is color code them. They match the same color coding that was on your agenda from last time. And then you see the ranking, the average score of the numbers for what that ended up being to the right. So it's sequential from there. Our top rated was the idea of high concept, high touch in this world. What does that mean? Our bottom rated was this idea of the gig economy, saying that since any work that can be repetitive can be automated, how do we prepare students for non-routine work? That was the idea, at least in the room, on February 1st that resonated the least. This next protocol that I'm going to ask you to engage with people at your table is called it's a Harvard thinking routine. And it's called Connect, Extend, and Challenge. The sentence prompt is, what connects with your thinking? Like, hey, so I look on here, something that connects with me is. The second sentence stem or sentence prompt can be, you know what extends my thinking on here? Something that kind of pushes me in a direction is this. And the third option is, you know, something that I challenge or that is challenging my thinking right now is this. Those are the 3 prompts that I would ask you. You got to pick your seats. The other comment that I'll make is on one of the pieces of feedback last time, we heard from some school officials and some school employees who said there might be a misperception that as a school administrator or as an educator sitting at the table, that people are looking to me for answers. Our school administrators and our school teachers and everybody who's kind of employed by the school, they're in the same boat as everybody else. Engaging in the same way that you're engaging with the material right now. So please don't look at them like, hey, so what's the right answer here, teacher? Because, you know, they want to engage with you as well. So the question right now for you to talk about at your table for the next 10 minutes is, on this sheet, it's simple. On this sheet, what connects with you? What kind of extends or pushes your thinking? Or what challenges your thinking right now? Are there questions about the prompt? This is Boone County specific data. Are there any questions about the prompt? It's 7:11. I'll start interrupting you at 7:20. We'll come back together at 7:21. Have a conversation at your table, please. Just like we did before, we'll kind of go through a roll call by stakeholders. What I'd like to do first, anyone who comes up to the microphone, the sentence prompts will be the same. something that connected with our table. Now, it can be your own individual opinion, or it can be something shared at your table. But remember, in order to create safe space, the easiest way to do that is to leave that kind of comment anonymous. You don't necessarily have to own it then, but something that connected with our table and our conversation, or extended our thinking, or something that challenged our thinking. Can I have a volunteer from the business community? If your primary reason or method or coming into this space tonight is that you are an active business member, I met several of you last time from Rotary to the hospital system and healthcare system. Is there somebody from business that would like to come up and share the beginning of a sentence prompt that was started at your table? It's always nice to get to know folks. Don't be intimidated. Something that connected with us at our table, a member of the business community. What? Work, daggone it. Come on up. We've got a microphone for you. A round of applause for our business.
Hey guys, I'm Kristen Warwick. I'm a high school business teacher at Boone County. I've met a lot of you guys in this room. It's my second year teaching ever, and I came from working in corporate for about 18 years. I started working for the Bengals, and I ended my career working at U.S. Playing Cards. So I was in brand marketing and business. So that's kind of what I hammer tonight, is just to kind of bring that perspective. I'm really passionate about being a business teacher in the high school setting, just because managing a lot of entry-level students coming out of college or an internship, I think that I can add a lot of value to that. So from a perspective of kind of what we connected on our thinking, just that workforce and routine, non-routine, we don't necessarily know what the jobs are going to look like 10 to 15 years from now. And there are going to be a lot of things that are automated. But one thing that we would like to see students continue to think about is I saw this a lot. A lot of kids come in right out of college thinking they're going to make $100,000 a year. It's not going to happen. And I don't want you thinking you're going to be vice president tomorrow. So I always tried to hire those people that are willing to roll up their sleeves and clean the toilets if they have to. Divide and conquer. And no matter, we all kind of put our pants on the same way kind of thing. So we talked a lot about that and how being willing to, work as a team and clean the toilets if you have to, like whatever you got to do to make it work. So that's something that we talked a lot about in our group.
Thank you very much. A round of applause, please. Can I have an educator come up and share something that connected or extended or challenged? Yes, ma'am, please. Thank you very much. Volleyball. Yes, all right, there we go. Were you the libero?
Hi, my name's Tasha Lovins. I'm in my 21st year teaching math at Ryle High School and coaching.
There you go,
Ryle
go
High
volleyball.
School, so there you go. But I have the privilege of sitting at a table with three wonderful young students. We have a senior, a sophomore, and a sixth grader. So as a high school teacher, it was nice to hear their perspectives on some things. So what connects with your thinking? The first thing that was brought up was empathy and noticing that the human interactions were some of the highest scored. And actually the students were the ones that brought up again the pandemic and thinking about like our sixth grader, the last time she had a regular school year was in third grade. And how that can affect and the maturity level. And as a teacher, we've seen, the maturity level of our students, good and bad. But it was interesting to hear the perspectives of the students that were at the table with me, because they see that in some ways, with the pandemic and with the use of technology and different things that maybe they had access to that they didn't have before, their maturity level shot up in ways that maybe is not great, but yet they're behind in some other skills. And that we really need to work at that, finding that happy ground of where the students are kind of right now at the maturity levels, and then building on that.
Thank you very much. A round of applause, please. Well said. Thank you. How about a parent? I mean, we about a student perspective, a business perspective, or business teacher perspective, and an educator perspective. How about from the parent perspective? Challenges. Please, thank you very much. So, I don't know. Did I share? I started out my education career after I came out of the military as a special education teacher. So, like those awkward silences that other people get kind of uncomfortable with, I really enjoy. So, the longer y'all sit there and like, hey, I don't know if I want to say anything, I like it. But thank you.
Jenny Murray. I think I'm going on year 11 or 12 as PTA, PTO mom. Loving it. We talked at the table about how we were excited to see the top of the page being that more focus needs to be on empathy and on feeling and human interaction. Kids have lost that, and it's not just because of the pandemic, it's technology, it's so many things that kids have learned to just do things by themselves and on their phones and on their tablets, and they've also lost a bit of their work ethic, we said. So we feel like they need to work more collaboratively, whether that's out in service projects or in school, so that they can learn how to communicate better. No matter what job you get, you have to know how to communicate well. So just working with each other and learning how to communicate with the teachers and the parents and each other, I think, is what we feel is most important right now.
Thank you very much for sharing. Round of applause, please. And what was your name, ma'am? What was your name, ma'am? What was your name, ma'am? I'm sorry. Jenny. Thank you very much, Jenny. And then finally, since we're talking about students, it would be very appropriate to hear from students. Do we have, please come on up. Thank you round of applause, first of all, for just shooting right up there. So again, the sentence prompt really easy. What connects, what extends, or what challenges? Thank you, Levi. Oh, with the microphone.
I personally think a challenge because at my school, a bunch of students struggle with concentration as well as empathy, because in our modern day, especially because of COVID, a bunch of people have been forced to mature at sort of a high pace and lose empathy towards others, which is what I've learned from being in middle school and being around that sort of group. And as well as for empathy, now I've also seen a bunch of students not being empathetic towards others. I've experienced firsthand bullying, and I've noticed others being bullied, which shows how people are lacking empathy towards others. And I personally think that's what, for the most part, what we need to work on more in the future. But as well as trying to help students focus is another pretty good one to be high on the list.
Wonderful. Well said. Thank you very much. Please. What was it was Levi, right? What was your name? What was your name? Lee. A couple of, and truly I do appreciate it, a couple of observations I think a lot of what Lee was just kind of referring to call executive functioning today, right? Goal setting, kind of the intrinsic motivation component of what it means to set and regulate time. Another observation that I heard was, listen, on that 3-2-1 Likert scale, if everything is above a 2, which means we think everything is important, can it really be important if everything's important? I think that was a very fair statement that I heard. Another statement, which I heard a lot here, at the forefront of where we are, is that relative to what we've been through over the last 2 years? Is that relative to our community or what our students have experienced? Our 6th grader, the last time that she had, quote unquote, what we would consider a normal year of school, she was in the 3rd grade. So naturally, some of those things should be obvious to us. And then another thing that I think, and somebody brought up, was this idea of the routine to non-routine work in gig economy. Like, how often do we allow students, see, this isn't what was said, but I'm riffing off of that for a moment. sequence of learning. I go into math, I leave math, I go to language arts, I leave language arts, I go to social studies. These sequential moments and being owners of our own learning. Like, how frequently do we give the opportunity to really master our own learning and be our own boss in that space? These ideas by themselves are not meant to be standalone. Let me be clear about that. Regardless of what these ideas are, they're not meant to be standalone by themselves. They have to be seated in this deep, rigorous academic content. Nobody is saying that third grade reading scores or ninth grade algebra scores don't matter. They do matter. They do matter in order to be successful in our world today. However, there are other things that go along with those skills that matter as well. And if we have a framework, as our superintendent kicked off tonight with, then we want to make sure that framework is oriented to your thoughts. Here's what the ask is now. So you just had time to weigh these ideas individually. You talked about them at your table. It's now 7:32 or 32 minutes after the hour. There is a list of competencies. Now, here's a couple of questions. Before we get too far into this, there is a list of 30-ish competencies for your consideration. That list of 30-ish competencies, number one, you're going to see the words like adaptability and empathy, and they don't necessarily go along the same way. Like, we're not saying we want our students to be adaptability. That's not really the idea. The idea is kind of what's embedded there. What's important for students today, if they are college bound, if they are bound for the military, kind of our 3 E's, right? They're going to be employed after they leave Boone County. They're going to be enrolled in a follow-on institution after they leave Boone County, or they're going to be enlisted or go into the military after they leave Boone County. What are the ideas that need to go along with our rigorous academic content that matter to us? Based on not the table, but also based on the ideas of what you think matters here, what are those competencies? A second thing that I would say about that list is my list. And I say mine, not like Steve Fuji's list, but Patel for Kids list. It's sterile. It's based on research, it's based on literature scans, it's based on best practices, but it is not all-encompassing. It is not all-encompassing. There might be words there that are missing that you think matter and need to be there. For that reason, there's an other category on my list that you can click other and type it in. The opportunity exists also for you to say things that matter to you here in a moment. But the request is simply take a few moments individually now. We did an activity where we got to know each other and heard from each other. We did an activity where we looked at our data from our last meeting and talked about it. What kind of connected with our thinking, so on. Now, as you think about our students today, when they will graduate this year and into the future, what are those skills, those 21st century skills that need to go with our deep, rigorous academic content based on what you believe? This is where you're going to weigh in yourself. And I will ask you, to the extent possible, to be able to use the platform, and I'll come around and help. But those 32 ideas, once you kind of look at them and read through them, people will do a whole bunch of things. They'll circle them, they'll mark them, they'll rank them, they'll say, Steve, I can't come up with just 7. They'll say, Steve, some of these sound the same. Critical thinking sounds like problem solving to me. That's fine, pick one. You'll say, hey, gosh darn it, what this young lady, what Lee just said when she was up here sounds like self-regulation, or where's that at? It might be under self and goal-directed. Those ideas are there, and if you don't see something represented, you have the opportunity to call that out. I'd like, now that it's 35 after the hour, for us to take 5 minutes and for you individually to think about that and input your ideas for yourself. Any questions about the prompt? If you don't have technology and you trust me, I mean, that's really I just gave you 2 things. Number 1, you don't have technology, and number 2, you're willing to trust me, then you can turn in your paper to me and I'll take that. I would prefer it to be like this because then I'm not worried about data entry. Questions about the prompts? I just spoke for a whole nother minute. So we'll go to 41 after. I'm going to come around and I'm going to check to make sure you can get on the platform if necessary. Let's take 5 minutes. We'll go to 741. Individually, please. You have one non-negotiable. If on this list of 32, or if there is another there, like being drug-free is something that's necessary for us, what's your one non-negotiable? I'll ask you to think about that. And as people are finishing up in a moment, that will be the one ask to get up and meet somebody new and share, and why that's important to you. So as a parent, the one non-negotiable that I think needs to be on our list is X, because here's what I've seen in my kids, or whatever that statement is for you. Is there a question about the prompts? Who needs more time to put their 7 ideas in the platform? Yay, I see that, that's tap dancing right there. That's called quality timing. So here's the ask. I'm going to ask you to take a moment. You can help yourself to some more water. You can help yourself to some of the Reese cups up here that haven't been used yet. And meet somebody new and share your one non-negotiable. Please up and see your next door neighbor who you always talk with. Find somebody new and share what you think your non-negotiable is and why. Let's take 5 minutes, please. Thank you very much. Meet somebody new.
Hi, this is David.
Hi, David.
He is an 8th grader at Gray Middle School. He actually had 2 non-negotiables, which I appreciated. One was empathy, because as he pointed out, middle school can be a little rough, and we want to make sure that students understand that we're all the same and we should be able to get along. And technology, because it's changing very rapidly, and they rely on it so much, and it'll keep changing, and they need to be able to keep up with that.
Yeah, and I love that, because that's a little bit of the balance of the human interaction and how the world is changing and what we're using. Well said, David. Thank you very much. How about another person who's willing to introduce their friend? Oh, yeah, no, good. Give them a round of applause. That's okay. Sorry about that. She started, and I think I cut her off. I'm sorry. How about another person willing to introduce their friend, a new friend, somebody who met somebody and has a non-negotiable? See, this is the part of the 7th grade teacher in me that I love. Sure, you can do it again. You're going to introduce a friend?
I met Charla Lake. She's a 1st grader at Collins Elementary. And we kind of agreed that integrity is both of our non-negotiable, because it kind of, if you have integrity, it kind of encompasses like everything else, except maybe technology. Sorry, Drew.
No, that.
But also perseverance as well.
Oh, yeah, especially with what we've been through. Thank you very much. A round of applause for this team. I do appreciate it. So one of the things that you all said was the best part of the last meeting was the chance to meet somebody new and kind of talk through these things. Wanted to make sure you had that opportunity, especially since you got to pick your own seats tonight, and it's, probable that as you picked your own seats, you found a couple of people in the room that you knew the best, and like you sat there with them. So it's important to get different perspectives. Is there anyone else? And I won't put anybody through any uncomfortable moments this time. Okay, then thank your partner. We'll go back to our seats one last time. Here's our last invitation of the evening. First of all, if you had trouble getting on the Wi-Fi, thanks to our Boone County friends who shared kind of a little bit of the how to go about doing it. And I'll leave this up here for you in the event that you're one of the people that had trouble getting on the Wi-Fi and didn't want to say anything to me. Our apologies. Last time it seems like you could get on and it was completely wide open. This time it seems like you have to get on with a little bit of a additional requirement. We will finish a little bit earlier tonight, and the opportunity ahead of us right now is you had a chance to weigh in first individually about our data from last time, and then consider that data and figure out what things were most important to you. Our final ask of the evening, it's not the final thing that we're going to do together, but the final ask of the evening now is as you sit together with a table. We've got roughly 30 tables in the room tonight, each of them with 4, 5, or 6 folks at it. If you're at a table of like 2 or 3, if you don't mind kind of consolidating and maybe getting together with another table, it just keeps some of the data a little bit sharper. But the invitation is this. You had your own individual idea. See if at your table there are some consistent ideas that kind of round out the group. So if you all had 3 or 4 or 5 of them in common, let's see if we can figure those out. Because this ask is to come up with a group of 7 at your table. So the first time you kind of came up with a group of 7 individually, see if you can come up with a group of 7 at your table. That's the request. We'll take a solid, I'll check in with you here in about 15 minutes and see how that feels to you. If we finish earlier, we finish earlier. If it takes us a little longer, no problem. We want to come up with a group of 7 at your table. If you have to rename them, that's fine. There is no kind of requirement on this except for an idea of those concepts that are consistent, that you can agree upon. Questions? I see people are already starting, so I'll be quiet. Let's take 15 minutes and do that. So real quick, a little tally of some of our individual thoughts first. The number you see off to the right is the actual number. It's not a percentage. So I think that we have 24 tables in here of roughly between 4 and 6 per table. So right now, your highest kind of go-getters, if you will, individually first are communication. Actually, empathy with communication has a number of 62. I know that might be hard to see from your seat. Let me see if I can kind of do this here for us. 62 individuals selected communication. 59 individuals said empathy. Scrolling down and continuing to look. Those are really the 2 major ideas here so far. I know that there are some additional thoughts that are out there, and I know that you have been talking about those at your table. I wonder if there's an individual who would like to talk on behalf of the table. This is not about your list per se, but it might be about a theme, something that kind of was discussed at your table overall. For instance, I know in one of our back tables, we literally just went down and said, okay, raise your hand if you had this one, raise your hand if you had this one, and then we tried to compile a list that way. At a table over here, they were talking about some of these ideas really sound like the same thing. So can we group them together? And then what do those sound like? My curiosity is, after seeing a little bit of the big time macro themes, if you will, of individual votes, again, adaptability, communication, and empathy are the 3 that like jump out to me of opportunities. And let me also say this. There's zero doubt in my mind, zero doubt, that communication, based on just our students that have come up and talked even tonight, there's zero doubt in my mind that communication skills are taught in this district. There's no doubt. We see that in the students that have come and that have come up and spoken, The students that have spoken, thank you. Shoo. I second guess myself, apologies. But really, the question is, do we hold that trait consistently throughout our system in terms of expectations? So a question was asked, hey, Steve, come on. Some of these things, can they really be measured and taught? Like, to what degree are we really expecting an outcome here? And I think if I reflect back to what our superintendent said at the very beginning about tonight, it's really about setting a clear target that is vulnerable and driven by stakeholders, and then let the professionals begin to build or scaffold what those expectations are for students, because that's part of what we want to do for this community. This is education from a different perspective. It's not education that's being forced upon us from either the national or state government. It's education in terms of what we think resonates here the most. So to that end, are there some stakeholders that want to speak about a theme discussed at your table. And because I'm assuming that tables are relatively mixed, meaning students and teachers and internal and external stakeholders, is there a general theme that you noticed at your table that anybody wants to share? Okay. Okay, I won't hold you hostage on it then. I'll just ask that if there is, the ask in this space is designate one person from the group who can go through and actually add the idea on behalf of the group. So right now I have the individual thoughts. I'd love to know what your table thinks, and you can do that by asking one person to do it from your table and just type in your 7 ideas here. This way, you're not stuck with my language. This way, you can add your 7 based on what those groupings or those ideas are from you. If there's one person at your table that would be willing to do that on behalf of the table, and my students in the room knows what this means. It means nose goes, so the last person who touches their nose has to be the one who does it for the table. I don't know. That's a pretty easy way to do it. But as you do that, the opportunity for us is to make a little bit of a transition. So hopefully everybody has one person at your table who's willing to do that data entry for us. The other chance that you have as a community is to really think about how these words might go together. So if the focus on words has kind of driven you a little bit up a wall tonight, because that's what we've talked about from my beginning activity until this very moment has been about words, then this is a little bit of a shift for you. That's with an F. That's a little bit of a shift for you to start thinking about what creatively resonates in Boone. What do I mean by that? Well, we know that images have been used throughout human history to signify different things. We take pleasure. We take pleasure in art. We take pleasure in kind of the mixture of words with images. So for the last part of the evening, what I'd like to do is somebody very candidly asked me, what's the point, Steve? What are we doing with this? The idea is that we would walk away from this process before we start strategic planning with a very clear target. The target we're looking for tonight, or through this process, is called a portrait of a graduate. It may not be portrait of a graduate. It might be your language. It might be Boone County aspirations for student learners. It might be student profiles. It might be something, but a clear and concise goal. Ideas about what that has looked like around the country. I have some examples to maybe share with you if you're interested. These are 2 Ohio schools. One of them is Reynoldsburg on the left and Granville on the right. The idea of educators and competencies being uplifting so that students can flourish and grow. The one on the right you see very clearly is a one high school town where it's a college town, and the idea is that they're very in touch with their mascot. This is a district I have a pleasure of working with out in Illinois. They're a very diverse district. They wanted to kind of represent that diversity in their 3 high schools and what that might look like. Here's a very unique one out of Virginia with pictures of their own students and what they think these things mean. It's kind of a brand promise or a commitment to families about what we'll be doing in addition to math, science, and social studies. Not far up the road, actually, if you just go up 71, Washington Courthouse derives its name because evidently President Washington rode through this little town, and they have kind of some Doric style columns that they think really resonate, and they wanted to be able to articulate those in there. You see the courthouse that gives Washington Courthouse its name, and the columns. They wanted to be able to represent those columns that are actually in their high school in their portrait. This is a district in Vermont. If you've ever been skiing in the Killington area, I like this one a lot because they really, farming and the organic nature of their farming that they take a lot of pride in is kind of here for them, and then they also wanted it to be locally developed but globally inspired kind of ideas, or globally prepared. An example out of Missouri and how a community surrounds their young people until they graduate. This fountain is in the center of their town square, so they kind of use that same fountain idea in their portrait. They wanted their diversity and kind of teamwork and surrounding or community aspiration there. A final example from a New Hampshire town that has actually a one-room schoolhouse. This is a physical picture of that one-room schoolhouse that they wanted represented. And then the style of this sign, if you will, is actually from the sign itself as you enter town. So that these words, forgive the pun for a second, but hang on something that resonates, that would be consistent with what you expect here in Boone County, Kentucky. My commitment is, I actually have, it's unique, I was a superintendent before. I've never worked with graphic designers and marketing and communications specialists till I came into this role. Coming into this role and having the chance to work with really unique kind of aspirational designers and creating something, what we'll present to the superintendent and his team based on your ideas, literally 3 sketches. Yeah, they're hand-drawn sketches, but we do that just to kind of try and capture your ideas on paper first, and then get the superintendent's feedback on a direction to go for a product. So that's my task as we move forward. The opportunity for your consideration, just as one team member is right now typing in feverishly 7 competencies that you discussed at your table, you also have the chance to weigh in and say the images that you'd like to see captured here. Is it about diversity and inclusion? Is it about basketball? Is it about, I don't know. You know, I don't. What is it about for you that represents Boone County, Kentucky? To that end, the last thing that I would share with you before we ask Superintendent Turner to come back up is that the work doesn't stop here. The work will continue in the meantime and between time before our next meeting. Sorry, give me a second. There we go. The work will continue between now and our next meeting, not only from the concept of sketches, but also Superintendent Turner's meeting with the business community to go over these same concepts and get their input. So the CEOs, the human resource managers, the marketing folks of the big area kind of corporations, in conjunction with some of the local government entities, have asked, hey, how can we weigh in on this? So before we come back together next time, Superintendent Turner is going to be doing some of that work and asking some of those same questions so that when I come back, I'll bring to you a data set. Just like I did from our first meeting where we talked about the landscape shifts and I brought back your material to you to let you tell me, is it on the mark or are we missing something? Next time I'll bring back your individual thoughts, which I kind of shared visually. I'll bring back the individual thoughts of your business partners, and I'll bring back your community thoughts so that we can put all these things together and start to formulate what that target is for Boone County. We'll have a very concise, much more concise, refined picture of what that should be when we come back together and finish our next meeting. So that by the time we finally finish this process in meeting 4, we'll have a product to place in front of you that hopefully you'll see your ideas reflected back on. That says, here becomes the beginning of our brand promise, our commitment to all of our families, all of our students in our community about what it means to be a Boone County student. When a student walks across our stage, not only do we certify that they've met all of the graduation requirements to the Board of Education and to our families, but that we also know that they understand what it means to be a good communicator in today's world. And it means something different than it did 2 years ago when we're doing things like virtual meetings and in-person meetings and hybrid meetings and having to do those things. It means something different. What does it mean here? That is our journey that we want to take together. I appreciate your willingness to kind of play along with me. Hopefully tonight we accomplished a couple of things. Number one, you got to meet somebody new. You got to hear different stakeholders' opinions about how the world has changed and what our response should be. You got to talk at your table and weigh in individually about your individual opinion, and you got to talk about that with your group. Then we shifted a little bit, and you thought about, okay, from a picture standpoint or from a visual standpoint, what should that mean? Because when we come back together, we want to be able to have a final product. It's been a pleasure for me to be able to be with you this evening. When we come back together for that third meeting, we'll be able to refine this, and I hope to be able to demonstrate your work back to you in a way that you can see your ideas uplifted. So thank you very much for your opportunity, the opportunity to be here. Thank you very much, Superintendent Turner. I turn it over to you, sir. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you.
Just very brief to wrap up. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your conversation, your energy, and your input. Please put your data into the system and make sure we have that recorded. This will be very important for us. One other note, just your name badges, just leave them right there on the table, and we'll collect them later. Our third meeting, he was talking about the shared vision that we'll work on in meeting 3. That'll be Tuesday, March 15th. We'll see you then. Thank you.